Our last guest is Diana Haussling, the Director of eCommerce Marketing for the Campbell Soup Company. Diana is a bold leader in e-commerce, marketing and sales, known for transformative thinking and fresh perspectives. Utilizing her deep expertise, she has driven performance at 3 Fortune 400 companies, leveraging data and consumer insights to engage consumers, fuel brand connection, and significantly increase sales. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Hi, Diana. How are you?
I'm doing awesome.
Good. Like I've been doing for everybody else. Why don't we spend the first 5 minutes contextualizing your journey and your career, and then we'll get into some stuff.
Yeah, I have a very unconventional CPG background. I've worked for 3 big CPG organizations, love them both. I love all 3. Campbell's right now being my favorite. I have a really, I got to keep the paychecks coming.
I hear you.
I started off really grounding myself in a strong sales background. So really understanding that retailer mindset, the retail environment, in both out in the fields, building cases, selling things, boots on the ground, from direct selling. And then I really took a very focused effort on making sure I was getting a breadth of experience that allowed me to get a unique, differentiated background. I reload 8 times. I worked on channels that were in the past up and coming, where there was little data and it required an entrepreneurial spirit. These were the scrappy channels, so not a lot of people were looking, so you got to do a lot of really cool, fun things. I cut my teeth in shopper marketing and marketing to really understand not only the retailer's point of view, but to translate brands' perspectives and what they wanted to do into a retailer environment. So how do we get to those win-win solutions? Right now, I'm in a role at Campbell's where I lead the e-commerce function. I also lead shopper marketing and consumer promotions. It's a really exciting time to be in the e-commerce space right now with all of the growth. But with all that growth comes a lot of visibility and a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Yes, AKA 5 seconds ago, pre-COVID, nobody was really paying attention. And then 2 seconds later, everybody's eyes are on it, right?
Exactly.
Was that a tough transition? How long have you been at Campbell's?
I've been at Campbell's for 8 years.
And how long in this function on e-commerce?
So I've touched e-commerce in varying roles, but in this specific role, it's been a year. So it went from, I was trying to work my way into getting meetings on people's calendar to now everybody wants an update on e-commerce at every level.
Right. And you obviously have the advantage of being in the building for an 8-year period, obviously, because I'm also very fond of your CEO, Mark Klaus, and I've worked with him in other places. A new CEO comes in and you've got this role and you probably want to build it out and get it kind of set up the way you want. And then boom, it's prime time. It's almost like building a Broadway play, but then having to move up opening night by 6 months.
Exactly. The acceleration, it has been, it's been crazy, but it's also been exhilarating because, we've actually been able to make a lot of tractions in areas that are important to us. But it's also, as you look around, things are happening now and you want to be able to jump on these opportunities as they go. But it's a big shift. Campbell's and most big CPG organizations are. So it does take a lot of muscle to shift it and really be able to take advantage of this type of space.
And to take it even further back, your first CPG job was in shop. Like, how did that happen? Were you in school? Did you always want to do that? Was it completely random? Just again, for some of the people that are listening
I interned with Hershey. I started interning there in retail and I just asked them if I could stay on and I never left. And really those retail roles, what I love about them, they're probably some of the roles that folks don't think are the most prestigious, but you're literally in the stores, you're selling displays, you're selling your product and your brand, you're understanding what's working, what's not working. I had the best advice from a director that I had, and he basically was like, you will never sell in a bad product. You will never launch a crappy item as a marketer because you know what it's like to have to be in a back room trying to get rid of that product. So it does make you stronger, and those experiences are really help, set me up for this type of role, which requires you to really understand the brick and mortar space, understand how consumers and shoppers think, but also that retailer thought process and what's going to motivate them to elevate your brands.
I like that. What about the transition from traditional to non-traditional for, let's go nerdy within the CPG landscape? You know, you're gonna have a lot of people here in the next 24 to 36 months go from being, you know, a brand manager, very kind of classic B school, this is how you do it, to some of these new functions, especially ironically in your category of e-commerce. You know, what's your recommendation? What's the watch outs? What's the things that they need to be considering?
Yeah, I think for CPG as a whole, talent profiles are really going to have to be reinvented and reevaluated. In the past, it's very much so you were a salesperson, you did your sales track and you went up the ladder, and you know, maybe one day you were the SVP of sales. You were the marketer, you did your marketing track. Maybe you did one like stint in sales and that was it. You checked that box and you became the CMO. Now this notion of a hybrid model is really going to have to come to fruition. We're really going to have to think about how we design teams, because when you're in the e-commerce space, it's really about being collaborative, but you have to understand a little of marketing. You have to understand some retail media. You have to have experienced not only different channels and functions, but different categories. And that's going to be the challenge for a lot of folks that are coming up now. Those traditional career paths are not going to be what makes you successful in e-commerce. And you're really going to have to rethink, you know, how you approach your career in the long term if you want to be able to be successful in this space.
How do you think these big organizations, you know, so what you're speaking about really rings true for me, because it is really talking entrepreneurial nuances. How have you seen, you know, how have you seen entrepreneurial tendencies actually become palpable in these big organizations? You know, how do these big organizations become more entrepreneurial? Like, what's your kind of take on that? Like finding the balance of being corporate and using the strengths of that scale and all those things, but also creating a little bit more of a spirit of, you know, the report's not going to tell us what's going to happen. And oh, by the way, like all these reports that everybody lives by, they're pretty flawed when you look at the reality of what's actually happening in true sales. What are you seeing as somebody who's had that purview probably the majority of her career, and how is that manifesting right now in the current state of the CPG Fortune 500 landscape?
Yeah, you see the pendulum shift. I mean, there was a period of time, you know, a couple of years ago when e-commerce was the it thing in CPG again, and you saw a lot of companies bring in these hotshot digital gurus with Google glasses and you know, all kinds of sexy e-commerce things. And they did a lot of press, but they didn't make a lot of traction in the organization. And they probably frustrated a lot of their cross-functional teammates because they got a lot of money, they got a lot of attention, but didn't produce a lot of output.
Right. So they weren't grounded in the operational, practical nature of the business. They were good for Ad Age. They were good for a podcast. They were good to give a keynote at South by Southwest, but it was all sizzle, no steak.
Exactly. There was no substance. And that's where first the CPGs have to really think through, what do you want? You know, do you want the sizzle, or do you want to actually make progress, and what is it going to take to get there?
Do you believe there's a small group of individuals who have the potential to deliver both for the organization?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a Black woman in CPG, corporate America, period. I know what it feels like to not really belong in the rooms that, you know I belong in, and to take up space. So there's a balance of pushing the status quo and really getting people to move in the right direction, but bringing them with you and influencing that change. Yeah. I think the difference in this go around now is that there has to be a direct tie to the P&L. There has to be a direct tie with key deliverables and goals that the organization wants to set. And it can't be a moving target. You know, a lot of the CPG organizations set out to say, like, we want to lead in e-commerce, and they brought in the hotshot to help them do that. But that's not the reality of every business model. You know, you really have to think about your brand segmentations and your portfolio roles and make the right choices so that you actually can have wins. There are just some categories and brands where you may want to, you know, just be competitive. And there's some spaces where your brand has a right to lead, and you have to make those smart choices. And then the folks that you bring in into the organization have to be able to actually influence the cross-functional teams that take stuff done, to get stuff done. My best friends at work, IT, production, supply chain, you name it. I've got a best friend in every department because that's how e-commerce functions. You really have to create these collaborative teams. And you're not going to have authority over all the people that you need to get your job done.
No, you will not. And that's where human dynamics and teamwork really matter. Talk to me then about another thing. I don't know how much this hits your radar, but I love your perspective of what you've just been saying. If we're going to talk about practicality in operations, I think budgeting has really hurt these companies as somebody who came into this industry 11 years ago, and 98% of people thought I was all sizzle and no steak and have earned my stripes through the years. I've actually thought the reverse. I knew that I was the, talking head from a different industry that people thought was definitely going to be full of shit. But I also knew that what people had forgotten in the Gary V catch up was I built an actual business since I was a child and only think operational, and ironically ended up to a lot of my contemporaries now more practical than them. I just happen to be a little bit out there in my personality of communication. One of the things that has really hurt a lot of my friends on the CPG or big brand side is the rigidness of a budget. And I've had some incredible conversations finally, because COVID's really hurt them, because I'm like, see, you planned all your TV, you planned all your trade, like real life requires the ability to adjust. COVID is the extreme, but oh, by the way, the things I've been yelling about for the last 10 years is every month you were making mistakes because you decided them a million years ago, and the world changed in a micro way, it changed in a macro way now. Your thoughts about the agility around budget?
Yeah, I think, and I've actually been trying to coin agile budgeting at Campbell's to try to get my way in some of these instances. But what I really see is, and this is for a lot of established organization, you live by your 3-year strat plan. You know what your drive periods are, you know what your playbook is, and COVID-19 kind of threw that out the window. So all of those things are what help, traditional long-standing organizations be successful, but they're also counter to how you react, operate, and make the most of opportunities in the e-com space. So the ability to really look at what's working and what's not and shift your dollars to really feed what's growing and pull away from what's not, that doesn't necessarily exist in some of the constructs that you have in the way that P&Ls and everything is tied specifically back to a brand. So the more and more we can get these traditional organizations, and this is where I'm talking to my finance friends, to come up with some solutions of how do you ring fence dollars that are there to shift and take advantage of growth? As we see and everything is new. We're encountering categories that are growing that we would never have thought have grown in that space. So they don't have the dollars set aside for that. So how do we pivot quicker? It takes a long time to make decisions in some of these spaces, and then you miss that opportunity. So how do we get our teams to think differently and more fluidly around how we invest in our business and optimize along the way?
Something fun for the last 2 minutes. Anything that you've purchased during COVID as Diana, the consumer, the human, the non-executive, like anything that you've picked up on, that you've bought, that you now realize, oh my God, when we quote unquote go back to normal, I won't be picking this up at Whole Foods or CVS or 7-Eleven or Wegmans or whatever it may be. Any insights from that of how you became aware of it, or what the experience was like, or why you won't be going back to buying it at a store, but you will buy it on e-commerce?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me, I'm one of the several people that I got a Peloton and I didn't even work out before COVID. But I figured it was something I had to start doing. So, I think there's just so many different lifestyle shifts that I've made. The biggest shift from a shopping behavior for me is now I no longer do the grocery shopping for my household. So that's like a change. Because we do click and collect, because there's delivery, I no longer do it anymore.
So who's doing it?
It's my husband. So that's—
Does he like it?
He likes the click and collect. He likes to be able to go in and pick it out. I do the selecting at home. He goes and picks it up. So that's just, if you think about the dynamic shift and what that means for impulse purchases.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Do you feel like the theme that everyone's hearing is big brands are doing well. Do you think it's because the discovery had a lot to do with shopper marketing or end cap dynamics or private labels or things of that nature? And do you think in this environment, brands really shine?
Yeah, I think brands are shining, but I think more and more it's my needs. So I'm open to more brands, which is scary for me as a manufacturer.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
open to more things because I'm not wandering down the aisle. I'm seeing something on Instagram and I'm like, okay, cool. I have the app function open. I'll just add it to my cart. And we talk a lot about getting on the list and the shopping list. Well, the shopping list is ongoing. So at any moment in time, I can basically have my Instacart app open, my Walmart app open, and I can be toggling through all of them, building the list that I want. And I don't even have to go pick it up. And it either comes here or my husband gets it for me. So I think it's the dynamic and how the shopper behavior and how we think about shopping is totally going to change. And who we're talking to, that dynamic in many households has shifted.
I love it. I couldn't appreciate your time more. Thank you so much, Dan.